Okay, picture this, a roofing contractor. 23 workers up on a roof, no fall protection in sight, and an OSHA inspector just pulled up to the site. What happens next is a masterclass in how incredibly high the stakes can get. In this explainer, we're gonna put your knowledge to the test. Let's see if you can guess the penalty.
So, an OSHA inspector rolls up to a job site, sees a roofing contractor hard at work. Seems like a totally normal day, right? Well, what that inspector sees next is anything but normal. The inspector counts them up. Not one, not two, but 23 individual workers exposed to a deadly fall hazard. And in OSHA's eyes, that's not one single mistake. Oh no, that is 23 separate willful violations. So what do you think the price tag on that was?
$3.6 million. And no, this is not some made-up number to scare you. This actually happened. The cost of cutting corners is absolutely staggering. So today, we're gonna play a little game. I'll walk you through several real-world scenarios. For each one, you have 2 jobs. Identify the violation classification and guess the maximum penalty. Keep score, all right? 2 points for each correct answer. Let's see how you do. Okay, before we dive into the quiz, you gotta know the rules of the game. To have any chance of getting the right answers, you need to understand how OSHA actually classifies these things. So let's do a quick and dirty rundown of the main categories and, more importantly, their max penalties. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Take a look at serious and other than serious. The max penalty is exactly the same. The only difference is how likely someone is to get seriously hurt. But now look at the jump for willful and repeat violations. Whoa, we're talking 10 times higher. And failure to abate? That's the real kicker. That's when OSHA tells you to fix something, you don't, and the meter just keeps running. Every single day. Got those numbers in your head? Good, ready to play? All right, let's do this. Time for round 1 of our little quiz. Pay attention, here is your first scenario. Okay, you've got a framing crew working up at 15 feet, no fall protection. The OSHA inspector does some digging and finds out the company got nailed for the exact same thing at a totally different site just a year and a half ago. So 2 questions for you. What's the classification and what's the maximum fine they're looking at? I'll give you 5 seconds. If you said repeat violation with a max penalty of $165,514, give yourself 2 points. And here's the key detail a lot of people miss. A repeat doesn't have to be at the same address. OSHA's 5-year memory applies to a company everywhere in the country. Also, notice this. For repeats, you don't get those penalty reductions for having a good safety program. The grace period is over. All right, next up. So a machine's safety guard is off for maintenance, as it should be. But then a supervisor, trying to hit a deadline, tells an employee, hey, just run it for a few cycles. It'll be fine. They're knowingly ordering someone to work on an unsafe machine. So what's the classification and what's the max penalty? Take a second. That, my friends, is a textbook willful violation, which also maxes out at $165,000. 2 more points if you got that right. This is the perfect example of what OSHA calls plain indifference. It's not that the supervisor didn't know, it's that they knew and chose to ignore it. And get this, willful violations have a minimum penalty of almost $12,000. Plus, if you get even 1 willful violation, you lose any good faith discount on your entire citation. Ouch. Okay, scenario 3. Let's switch gears a bit. An inspector spots a frayed electrical cord on the floor. It's a hazard, for sure, but maybe not an instant killer. Here's the twist though. This company is a model citizen. They've got a killer safety program all documented and a totally clean record. What's the call here? And what's the max penalty before any reductions? The answer is other than serious, with a max fine of $16,550. Now, while the hazard is real, it's not likely to lead to death or serious harm. But the real story here is the reductions. Because this company does things right, with a good program and a clean history, they can get that penalty knocked down by up to 45%, and that's before we even talk about their company size. This is how OSHA rewards companies that actually try. Okay, let's talk about the little guys for a second. We've got a small landscaping company, just 8 employees. They get hit with a serious violation during their first ever inspection. What's the single biggest discount they're likely to get, and how much of a difference will it make? Think about it. By far, the biggest factor here is their size. For a tiny company with 10 or fewer employees, OSHA can slash the penalty by a whopping 70%. As you can see, that takes a scary $16,000 fine and brings it all the way down to less than $5,000. It's a critical lifeline that keeps small businesses from getting wiped out by one mistake.
So we've seen how fines can get smaller. Now let's talk about how they get bigger, a lot bigger. How do you get from one mistake to that $3.6 million penalty we started with? Well, it all comes down to a terrifying little concept called per instance citations.
Here's the horrifying math. Step 1, OSHA finds one hazard, like an unguarded roof edge. Step 2, they count every single person exposed to it. Step 3, instead of one ticket for the bad roof, they write a separate full penalty ticket for every single worker. One mistake, 23 people at risk, that's 23 fines. You take that max willful penalty and multiply it by 23. The fine isn't per incident, it's per person. And that right there is the math that can literally bankrupt a company.
All right, I hope you're keeping score. We are now entering the advanced round. These next few are a little more complex. They dig into the finer points of enforcement. Let's see how you do with these. Okay, a company gets busted for an unsafe trench. OSHA says you have 30 days to fix this. They don't. A month and a half later, OSHA pops in for a follow-up, and that same deadly trench is still open for business with 0 changes. So what's the violation and what's the max penalty? This is a failure to abate violation, and the penalty is a jaw-dropping $16,550 per day. The fine isn't a one-time thing. The clock starts ticking the day after the deadline passes. In this case, they were 15 days late. That's nearly $250,000 in additional fines, right on top of the original one. And no, you don't get any good guy discounts here either. Here's a little curveball for you. A serious violation happens in Oregon, which is a state that runs its own OSHA plan. Does that even matter? Can their penalties be different from what federal OSHA would issue? What's the max fine there, and how does it compare?
And the answer is yes, they absolutely can be different. And in Oregon's case, they're higher. While federal OSHA caps a serious fine at $16,550, Oregon can go over $17,000. And their max for willful or repeat is higher too. This is a huge reminder for everyone out there. State plans have to be at least as effective as federal OSHA, which means they can, and often do, have even sharper teeth.
This is it, our last and, without a doubt, most serious scenario. A supervisor makes a conscious, willful choice to ignore a safety standard, and as a direct result, an employee dies. This is the absolute worst-case scenario. So what happens now, beyond just a check to the government? This is where the entire game changes. When a willful violation leads to a fatality, OSHA can hand the case over to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. We are not talking about company fines anymore. Now we're talking about individuals facing personal fines up to $250,000 and corporations facing $500,000. And most importantly, the people who made that call can go to prison. All right, pencils down. Let's tally up your score. We had 7 scenarios, 2 questions each, for a total of 14 possible points. So how'd you do? If you scored between 12 and 14, congratulations, you are a compliance expert. 8 to 11 points, you've got a really strong foundation. And if you scored below 8, hey, no worries, that's why we're here. I just recommend taking another look at OSHA's penalty schedule. To truly master these rules and, most importantly, protect your team, make sure you subscribe to HSE Study. So let me leave you with this. Now that you know the real cost, what's the one change you're going to make tomorrow?